Welcome, boys. Okay, in this video, we are going to be doing a... Why is this guy sitting here? His light's green, but he's just going to sit there all day for some reason. I don't know what his deal is. And then he waves at me. Alright, well, if we're going to have that kind of a drive where everybody be sitting there at the green lights, buckle up for safety. Alright, so, pardon my unkempt look, if I do look so unkempt. But this video, although it's going to be released before the video I just finished filming, I'm doing this after I just got done working on the car, changing the thermostat and the coolant in this thing. And then I figured I'd take it for a test drive, make sure everything's running nice and cool, and I'll go ahead and record this video after, while I'm doing that. Kill a couple birds with one stone. But, so this will come out first, but it's a hot day out. Hot and humid as usual. So anyway, we're going to do kind of the same video we've done with E38 and the Crown Vic, which is what it is like to drive an 03 Lincoln Town Car. So that's what we're in. This specimen has 49,000 miles on it. And it differs from the Crown Vic ever so slightly in that it has a different suspension. In 2003, they did change the suspension. And what happened is they went from shocks on the front to struts, and they changed the steering from the center drag link, like on my Crown Vic that has a drag link with a pitman arm and an idler arm, coming out of a steering box to the rack and pinion, which is what this has. Now, if you compare that to like the E38, the E38 also has a steering box with a center drag link. Well, it has struts in the front also. It does not have an air suspension. It does have an independent rear suspension, whereas this shares the Crown Vic's similar, solid axle rear end design, but it does have air suspension. So none of these three cars are alike. They all have something completely different. Crown Vic, all four shocks, coil springs, a center drag link in the front. BMW has independent rear suspension, struts all the way around, no air suspension. This town car has struts on the front, rack and pinion steering. Does have the live axle like the Crown Vic, but an air suspension. Now, with that said, you would think this thing would ride more like the Crown Vic, but it doesn't really. It rides more like the E38. This thing is a smooth cruising beast, if I do say so myself. And that is where this thing really shines. This is where this thing comes out above the Crown Vic by like a wide margin. The driving over the bumps and everything in the city, because the city roads suck in any vehicle. But this beast makes them very tolerable, actually. And with the 4.6 V8, it's also found in the Crown Vic. This thing will get out of its own way. You can pass people. And with this thing having less than 50,000 miles, all the ponies are still there. We have not ran out of horsepower. So even though everybody does drive like a jerk, the road rage factor can still be present, but it takes a long while to get there because this is such a treat to drive. So that being said, how does the riding part's great, the power also great. In general, I have noticed there's a couple of things that are different than from the E38 and the Crown Vic. Not so much in the car's performance, but just how other people kind of drive around you. Even though I think I drive generally a pretty good clip, these, for some reason people like to pass me a lot in this thing. They do not like being behind me. I don't know why, because I still drive pretty quick, and this thing's fast enough to get out of everybody's way. It's not like, compared to like most SUVs and stuff these days, it doesn't really obstruct everybody's view. And I know a lot of people pull out in front of me, like at the last minute. Like they'll come to a stop, they kind of look, they see me coming, then they look the other way, and then they think you see the gears in their head turn, and they're like, yeah, I got enough time to pull out. And like, instead of just pulling out right then and there, they wait until I'm like right up on him, and then they pull out in front of me. And I don't know why that is. Maybe there's some sort of like psychology expert listening to this that may be able to give us an insight as to why people do that, particularly when I'm driving this town car, but they do that for some reason. So what else can I really say about it? Well, working on it is quite easy. As I just finished with the thermostat job, that's about a 5-minute job on this car. You know, maybe 10 or 15 if you're doing the coolants as well. And you have to wait for it to drain. But it sure beats the hell out of like 7 to 8 hours as it took me to do that Hyundai Sonata, that 2014 I think it might have been, with that 2.0 liter 4-cylinder turbo. That thing sucked. You know, thermostat on this car, just as easy as it is on the Crown Vic. The only difference, which you'll see when that video comes out, is there's this funny looking piece of plastic that comes off the intake boot. It's not present on the Crown Vic, but you don't need to move it out of the way, so it's kind of a moot point. It's just there. If I'm to compare it with the other two vehicles, like I've got all three of them that I can drive should I choose to. But let's say I'm assuming you're watching this because maybe you don't have one of these yet. And you're thinking, should I buy one of these town cars? What are they all about? I would say yes. And if you're going to compare it with the other two, the E38 and the Crown Vic, now I can't tell you which of those three you should get. You'd have to kind of figure that out on your own by watching the 3 videos and kind of figuring out, because there are opportunity costs to owning each of these if you don't own all 3 of them. And I would say, going down the list here, you have to think, if you own the E38, it does ride every bit as good as this town car, or one could say the town car rides every bit as good as that. This thing it rides surprisingly well, considering it's got that live axle in the back. But the air suspension more than makes up for it. You know, the independent suspension on the E38 makes it ride really, really well. Struts at the front make it ride well too. And as for the steering part, I don't really know that this steers that much better than the other two for having rack and pinion. You know, maybe that makes a difference. To me, I don't notice a difference between the Crown Vic's steering box and this thing's rack and pinion. I don't. But this thing has about the same amount of features that E38 has. You know, it's got power mirrors. It's got heated mirrors. It's got the auto-dimming mirror and, the rear view. So the mirrors do defog, they do tint when there's lights shining on them. It's got climate control like the E38's got. That's pretty sick. And boy, is it cold, too. It's just as cold as it is in the Crown Vic. Crown Vic and this have amazing air conditioning systems. I'm guessing that's because Grandpa likes his AC. He likes his smooth cruising beast. Now, if you get over the stigma of this being a grandpa car, yeah, I would say get this thing, because going back to the E38 for a bit, that is fairly easy to work on for the most part. But you're running in, the problem you have with that car is parts availability and the expense of said parts. E38s are not very common. Once in a blue moon, I will see them driving around the city. There's a couple of them. But I see way more town cars than I see E38s. And just looking at my local pick and pull, there's town cars in there every week. There's Crown Vics in there every week. There are not E38s in there every week, so you're either buying new parts for a premium, or you're going to wait until one day, maybe you get some parts into the scrapyard. I wouldn't hold my breath on that. The Crown Vic is definitely going to be the cheapest to buy and run and repair, with a wide variety of parts available for it. You know, but it does not ride anywhere near as nice. I'd say if you're going bang for the buck, this is the one you want to have. You want to get this, the town car, because it's got all the features, we'll say, that the Crown Vic has got. You know, the engine and the parts availability and cheapness of said parts. It has that going for it, but this thing is just way, way nicer. I mean, it has like the sophistication of the E38 with the expense of the Crown Vic. This is the better car of all three of them. This is the one you want to get. Cruising around is a treat. You're not really in any hurry to get anywhere, but if you do want to get somewhere in a hurry, like this big dump truck I want to pass, put your foot down, and there he goes. So you're off to the races. So this thing will get her done. It absorbs bumps quite well, drives phenomenally well, steers well. It's not exactly light on its feet, but you're not going to worry about sliding off the road or anything in this thing. It does quite well for itself. The more important thing I can stress here is, now we're going to move on to the part I know you've all really come here for, but you want to know my opinion on about this car. That is, what is the headrest game like? Well, I can tell you, the headrests on this thing are top-notch. They're not E38 quality, but they're the next best thing to it. I feel fantastic with my head right up against this headrest. You know, definitely not going to be any whiplash should I get smoked in the rear end, if I'll even feel it. Speaking of whiplash, smoked in the rear end, repairs, etc., there's another thing that I can't really understate, and I don't think enough people really hammer this point home enough, is the full frame that this car has. The body-on-frame design of it makes working on it incredibly easy, because you can jack the car up from anywhere. You don't have to worry about, like on the E38, there's only 4 specific points you can jack the car up from. Not with this dude, you can lift it up from any point on this frame, and that makes it quite nice. Makes repairing it quite easy. I imagine it could take a hit should you get smoked. Why are all these kids out walking around with their masks on? Like, you're out, like, this is out of control. There's like a couple dozen kids walking by, college kids. They're all wearing these masks. It's like, one, summertime, and two, you're like in a well-ventilated area. Like, viruses can't live outside the body. The sun's out. What are you all doing? What are you doing? Isn't it hard to breathe in those things, walking around in this heat? Because it's hot out, boys. I'm drenched in sweat. Just from, like, changing the thermostat. Whatever. You know, when I did the interior collaboration video on this, you know, I mentioned it does have a CD player, and you can get other ways of music. So look at all these kids. I don't know how well you're going to pick them up, but they're all wearing masks. Broad daylight in the environment, as it were. Whatever. Okay, I get distracted. But all in all, this car is the one I think you want to get between all three of them. If you're on the fence about the Crown Vic, E38, or this guy, the town car. This is the one, and I actually lost out on a bid. I tried to buy one of these at auction. It was a 98. I was going to buy it for Katie, so she could drive around in a, 1, easy to work on car, 2, very reliable car, and 3, one that can take a hit. If she gets smoked in that neon, that's it. Boom, done. You ain't walking away from that one. She really needs to up her medical insurance in that thing. But I don't see you not walking away from a crash in this thing. A fun fact, it does have a 5-star crash test rating in every single category, including rollover. So again, full frame for the win. I just can't hammer that point home enough. That when I'm looking at cars to buy, there's a few things I'm looking for. Performance to an extent, but mostly reliability and ease of repair. Now, how long do I have to go between repairs, and how easy is it going to be to repair when it finally does break? The Crown Vic and this are both easy to repair and very reliable. The E38 is also easy to repair, and it has been fairly reliable for me, but you'll get a bunch of people on the internet telling you those cars are not reliable. Mine is. I can't speak to everybody else's, But, you know, the general consensus is these town cars and Crown Vics are reliable. So you will just get my anecdotal evidence on that. But everyone will tell you these Panther bodies are easy to work on. And so, in conclusion here, I will say I love driving this thing. It's fun. It's calming, soothing. The road rage is kept to a minimum. It's easy to work on. It's cheap to buy parts for and repair yourself in your driveway. It's got the power if you need it and you want it. And not a lot of people are eyeballing these right now. I think because this has the grandpa car stigma, that most people, this just goes under the radar. Most people aren't buying these things. You can get it for a steal. That 98 that I wanted to buy from Katie, that thing went for not much, man. I wanted to get it for maybe $1,500, I think is what I was going to bid up to. I think the guy won with a $1,650 bid. You know, with fees and everything, he was out the door less than $2,000, $1,850 or so. So, you know, I'll get another one once the opportunity presents itself. But for now, this will have to do. So, thanks for going on a ride with me, boys. Hopefully now you got a little more insight on these town cars and whether or not you think you should buy one. How it stacks up to the other ones. And the headrest, it ain't too bad. Thanks for watching, boys. Catch you in the next video. Peace.